You're serious about this? Carter's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness underneath it. You're offering me Clarissa, for 8 million naira. Evelyn didn't blink. She's nothing but a weight around my neck, she said bluntly. Blind or not, I've looked after her long enough. It's time she became someone else's responsibility. Carter gave a short, disbelieving laugh, leaning back slightly. And you think handing her over like cargo solves your problems? She's supposed to be your family. Evelyn shrugged, her voice ice cold. Family or not, she owes me. I fed her, clothed her, kept a roof over her head. Now I'm collecting what's due. There was a tense, stretching silence. Evelyn replied coolly, folding her arms. You need someone quiet, someone who won't attract attention. She's perfect for that. No noise, no drama, no questions. Carter's mouth curved into a humorless smile. Fine. You've got your deal, but don't expect me to treat her like a precious gift. The morning had barely begun when Evelyn's foster stepmother stormed into the room, her voice slicing through the air like a whip. You're lucky to even have this chance, Clarissa. Don't mess it up, she snapped. Clarissa barely flinched, excitement thrummed through her veins too strongly to be dulled by the older woman's usual bitterness. She clutched her worn-out bag a little tighter, tilting her head as if she could picture the scowl she knew was on Evelyn's face. I won't ruin it, Ma, Clarissa said with quiet determination. Thank you for helping me get this job. I really mean it. Evelyn gave a short, cold laugh. You ought to be grateful, you know. A half-blind girl like you getting hired? It's a miracle. You think jobs fall from the sky? Clarissa let the cruelty roll off her like water. Nothing could dampen the hope blossoming inside her today. After losing her parents, after all the years of surviving under Evelyn's grudging care, she was finally stepping into something of her own. A real job, in a grand house, working for someone important. Freedom, it was finally within reach. I know, Ma, she said, her smile unwavering. I'm very grateful. Evelyn exhaled heavily, her voice dropping into a tone that was less cruel but no more affectionate. Good. The driver's waiting outside. Don't you dare make me look bad. Go there, work, keep your mouth shut, and don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Clarissa nodded swiftly, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce hope. I understand, she whispered. Clarissa sat stiffly in the back of the luxurious car, her hands folded tightly over her small suitcase. The buttery leather seats were soft under her fingertips, and the faint perfume of jasmine hung gently in the air, but none of it calmed her nerves. The driver had spoken once, mentioning the 30-minute journey ahead, and after her polite thank you, a heavy silence had settled between them. No more words were exchanged. Clarissa kept her head tilted slightly upward, lost in her own swirling thoughts. She pictured grand staircases, glittering chandeliers, and endless hallways, images stitched together from the books she used to read before life grew too cruel. Her heart thudded in her chest as she whispered a prayer under her breath, asking for strength, for courage, for a new beginning. More than anything, she was grateful to be leaving the cold, bitter world of Evelyn's house behind. Every mile they drove felt like another layer of chains falling away from her spirit. She didn't dare ask the driver any more questions, she simply sat there, soaking in the silence, letting her dreams and fears clash inside her until the mansion came into view. The car rolled to a slow stop, and the driver turned slightly toward her. We've arrived, Miss Clarissa, he said, his tone crisp but respectful. Clarissa's heart jumped into her throat. She clutched her bag tighter, half expecting to be dropped at some dusty servant quarters. But instead, she felt the car door open and a soft, feminine voice floated to her ears. Come with me, Miss Clarissa. Let me guide you inside, the maid offered gently, taking her arm with surprising care. Step by cautious step, Clarissa was led across a smooth pavement and through a doorway where the air shifted, cooler, scented with fresh roses and something far richer than anything she had ever known. Her cane tapped lightly against polished floors, and every tiny sound bounced back at her, hinting at the enormous size of the mansion. No yelling. No barking orders. Only the gentle sound of footsteps and her own anxious breathing. She swallowed hard, still half expecting someone to snap at her to get to work already. Instead, the maid's voice came again, almost too sweet. "Lunch is ready, Miss Clarissa. Please, come this way." Clarissa blinked, thrown off balance. Lunch? Already? Was this some trick? She hadn't even unpacked a single thing yet. A tiny part of her braced for the usual harshness she was used to. Maybe they'd fatten her up first before revealing the real job, she thought wryly. Still, her stomach, always quicker than her doubts, growled in approval. She allowed herself to be led to a table where an incredible meal awaited, something so rich and fragrant that her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the plate. It had been years since she tasted food that didn't smell of burnt oil or resentment. Afterward, the maid was back at her side, ever the cheerful guide. "Let's get you settled into your room, Miss Clarissa," she said, her voice a smooth shield against Clarissa's mounting questions. Clarissa opened her mouth, ready to finally demand an explanation, but the maid, as if sensing it, quickly added, "Don't worry. Everything will be explained to you soon. Just rest for now." And once again, Clarissa found herself silently following, wondering what exactly she had just walked into. Clarissa's mind was a tangled mess of questions, racing faster than she could catch them. Why the silk sheets? Why the grand room? Why the overwhelming kindness? But even with all the confusion swirling inside her, exhaustion finally won. Slowly, she drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, barely noticing when the maid returned to quietly place her luggage neatly by the wardrobe. Time slipped by until the soft knock of evening arrived, followed by the maid's gentle voice asking, "Are you ready for dinner, Miss Clarissa?" Still full from the luxurious lunch earlier, Clarissa hesitated for a beat, but she wasn't foolish enough to turn down a second good meal, not when life had taught her that food, like kindness, could disappear without warning. Rising to her feet, she allowed the maid to take her hand once more, guiding her through the vast, silent corridors of the mansion. Clarissa couldn't shake the eerie quietness that clung to the place, but she kept her questions bottled up, focusing instead on the warmth of the maid's steady grip and the promise of another fine meal. When they reached the dining room, Clarissa was led to a seat at the heavy oak table, her fingers brushing the polished surface as she sat. That's when she realized, with a jolt, she wasn't alone, someone else was seated across from her. His presence was commanding without being overbearing, the kind of quiet strength that needed no announcement. Clarissa tilted her head slightly and said carefully, "I guess you must be Mr. Carter, my employer." Her voice was steady, though her heart was anything but. The man gave a soft, almost amused chuckle, answering in a voice rich and smooth, carrying a wisdom that suggested he was somewhere in his mid-40s. "You can call me Carter," he said simply, offering no grand speeches, no stern lectures. Clarissa was utterly bewildered. Was this how maids were treated now? Dining at the same table as their boss? She struggled to make sense of it, every part of her upbringing telling her she should have been eating in the kitchen, not here, seated in honor. Carter's next words only deepened the mystery. "If there's anything you want, Miss Clarissa, just let me know." His tone wasn't dismissive or commanding, it was genuinely considerate, almost too considerate, and Clarissa tightened her grip on the table's edge, realizing that whatever she had walked into, it was far stranger, and far more complicated, than anything she had imagined. The dinner ended quietly, and just as Clarissa reached for her plate, intending to assist, at least perform some duty to justify her place, Carter's soft chuckle stopped her. "No, Clarissa. That's not your job," he said with a warmth that confused her even more. She sat back down slowly, unease creeping up her spine. As if that wasn't enough, Carter turned to the maid with a simple command, "Please move her luggage to my room." Clarissa stiffened immediately, her fingers tightening around her cane. Had she heard that correctly? Her suitcase, into his room? She opened her mouth to speak but clamped it shut, unsure if she even had the right. The maid, without missing a beat, simply nodded and disappeared to carry out the order, leaving Clarissa sitting there, feeling like she had just stepped into a dream, or a nightmare she couldn't quite wake from. Carter approached her with that same maddening calm, offering his hand. "Come. Let me show you," he said, and though every fiber in her body screamed to protest, she found herself standing, allowing him to lead her gently through the silent house. As they climbed a different staircase and approached a new room, Clarissa tried to make sense of it all. Maybe this is part of the job, she reasoned desperately. Maybe this is just where the new maids stay until the real quarters are ready. But the moment Carter pushed the door open and she stepped inside, all those shaky excuses collapsed. The room was massive, the air heavy with lavender and the faint scent of Carter's cologne. Her fingers brushed the silky spread of a king-sized bed, and her heart skipped painfully in her chest. Panic rising, she turned toward him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why is there only one bed?" Carter let out a slow breath, as if he had been expecting the question. "Because, Clarissa, this is our bedroom." Her legs nearly buckled. She stumbled back a step, disbelief flooding her senses. "Our?" she echoed, the words scraping her throat. Carter took a steady step closer, his voice patient but firm. "Yes. Where we sleep. Together." Clarissa shook her head, overwhelmed. "No, no, no. There's been a mistake," she whispered urgently. "I was told I was coming here to work, to be a maid, not to." Her voice cracked under the weight of fear and confusion. Carter's sigh was soft but full of something heavy, something final. "Clarissa," he said, his tone carrying an edge of sorrow and certainty, "I'm not your employer. I'm your husband." Clarissa stumbled back, her vision blurring as the walls of the room seemed to tilt and close in around her. Tears welled up and spilled freely down her cheeks as she shook her head violently, choking out the words, "No, no, this can't be happening. There's been some mistake." Her voice cracked with disbelief, her body trembling under the weight of it. She had always known her foster stepmother wasn't fond of her, but to go this far. To throw her into a marriage with a stranger without her consent. Clarissa gasped for air between sobs, her dreams crashing around her. She had so many plans, things she still wanted to build, goals she hadn't even started working toward yet. Marriage was never part of the immediate picture, and if it ever would be, certainly not like this, not to a man whose face she couldn't even recognize. Carter remained still, his expression unreadable yet oddly patient as he took a small step toward her. "I know this is a lot," he said softly, his voice a steady anchor against the storm unraveling inside her. "I'm not asking you to accept anything tonight. You have every right to be upset. I'll give you tonight to think things through," he added quietly, his hands raised slightly as if afraid even his nearness might shatter what little composure she had left. Clarissa didn't respond, she couldn't. She could only stand there, heartbroken and stunned, trying to piece together how her life had spun so wildly out of her control. The next morning, Clarissa's heart was still pounding from the events of the night before. Sleep had barely touched her, her mind had been spinning, trapped in the endless replay of Carter's words. Husband. How could anyone marry her without her consent? How could her own foster mother, after everything, hide something so life-altering? Clarissa stormed out of the room, her voice shaking the stillness of the house as she cried out for the maid. "Help me pack. I'm leaving," she shouted, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. The walls seemed to close in on her, the polished floors mocking her with every desperate step she took. She couldn't stay a minute longer in this place that reeked of betrayal. Her hands fumbled with her bag, yanking open the closet, stuffing her few belongings back in without care. Tears blurred her vision, but her anger gave her strength. Before she could make it down the hallway, however, Carter appeared, leaning casually against the wall, dressed immaculately in a tailored suit that somehow made the situation feel even more unreal. "Clarissa," he said quietly, his voice carrying that same calm patience that infuriated her even more, "Are you leaving?" She swallowed hard, clutching her bag closer, forcing herself to breathe. "I need answers," she rasped. His gaze softened, unreadable, but he nodded and gestured for her to follow him down the long, echoing hallway. They walked in heavy silence, passing doors she hadn't even noticed before, the vastness of the house pressing down on her like a weight. Carter led her into a grand office filled with dark wooden shelves, towering books, and sunlight spilling through massive windows onto an equally intimidating desk. As he shut the door behind them, Clarissa spun to face him, her chest heaving with frustration. "Explain everything," she demanded, her voice sharp and raw. "Why did she do this? Why didn't you tell me I was being sold off like cattle?" Carter leaned back against the desk, arms folding across his chest, a deep weariness flashing across his features. "It's not as black and white as you think," he said slowly, searching her face for understanding he knew he wouldn't find. Clarissa's nails dug into her palms. "Then make it simple. Start talking." Carter exhaled heavily. "Your foster mother, she came to me months ago. She said she'd raised you since you lost your parents, done everything for you, and now, she needed compensation. She saw you as her investment, and this marriage was her way of cashing out." His words hit Clarissa like slap after slap, but he continued, voice heavy with something almost like regret. "She knew my kind of man doesn't want noise or a woman obsessed with being on blogs, social media, or stirring up attention. She said you were perfect, quiet, modest, someone who wouldn't crave the spotlight." Clarissa's mind reeled as she staggered back, disbelief choking her. Her foster mother, the woman she had spent years trying to please, had arranged to sell her off like property, spinning lies that she was desperate to marry anyone just to survive. Carter's next words cut even deeper. "She convinced me you were the right choice. That you would never object. She said you had no strong opinions, that you just wanted security. In return, she asked for 8 million naira. I agreed, believing I was helping someone who needed it, not stealing someone's life away." His voice faltered at the end, guilt darkening his eyes. Clarissa pressed a trembling hand against her chest as if trying to hold herself together. 8 million naira. That was the price her life was worth. She wanted to scream, cry, rip the whole mansion apart, but all she could do was stand there, heartbroken, betrayed, and drowning in a reality she couldn't escape. Tears welled up in Clarissa's blind eyes, spilling down her cheeks as she turned sharply away, her chest tightening with a deep, unbearable ache. She didn't need sight to feel Carter's presence drawing closer, his steps slow, cautious, as if afraid to push her any further. When he gently reached out, his fingers brushing her arm in a hesitant attempt to comfort her, Clarissa immediately pulled away, flinching from his touch as though it scalded her. "Don't," she choked out, her voice thick with pain and disbelief. Carter's hand fell back at his side, and for a moment there was only the heavy sound of both their breathing filling the space between them. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, genuine sorrow lacing every word, his voice breaking just slightly as though the weight of his own guilt was too much to bear. Clarissa stood rigid, her hands trembling, her body rigid with the storm of emotions raging inside her. Carter sounded utterly bewildered, almost speaking to himself when he murmured, "I thought. I was told you knew," his voice low, hoarse with regret. Clarissa didn't respond, she simply stood there, broken, betrayed, and surrounded by a darkness that went far beyond what her blind eyes could ever comprehend. Will Clarissa ever forgive the man she was forced to marry, or will this betrayal shatter everything before it even begins? Subscribe to find out what happens next.